Hi friends, welcome to another episode of The Everyday Grind, where we have short conversations on solving common challenges that we face every day, share our experiences, learn from each other, and stay aware of events going on around us. I'm your host, William Obiana. And at the end of the episode, if you would like to share your thoughts on the topic, please feel free to drop a chat on Twitter and Instagram at William Obiana. So let's get right into it. As we know, the government is divided into three powers: the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary. And in simpler terms, the legislative comprises of the National Assembly, the executive is the presidential seat, and judiciary is the Supreme Court. Now, of the three, the legislative is the most powerful because their main job is to actually make the laws. The executive is in charge of executing these laws, and the judiciary is, because they're basically like the least powerful of the three, all they do is to explain the law and constantly settle out disputes between the legislative and the executive. Now, the legislative, again comprising of the National Assembly, is the most powerful part of the federal government. And because they're so powerful, they had to divide them into two groups just so they don't have absolute power. And these two groups were the Senate and the House of Representatives. Now, together, they have the power to make the laws that is going to bring about the peace, order, and how the government is supposed to actually be running to ensure that everything is good in the country. Now, they also have the power to make sure that the president is supposed to be doing his job correctly, so they can ensure that the president is spending the public money that he's supposed to be spending the right way. They can approve of any of the candidates that the president should present to them as his staff, and they can also modify or approve or even reject a national budget that a president will submit to them. And this is typically done by the House of Representatives of the National Assembly. And finally, they can impeach a president if he's accused of a very bad offense, and this part is handled by the Senate of the National Assembly. Now, the country's constitution is a document that has all the laws of that country, giving the National Assembly this type of power of the presidential seats. So it was already dictated that the National Assembly will have this kind of control over the president. Now, again, from what we had already explained before, the National Assembly is divided into the Senate and the House of Representatives. Now, the Senate has about 109 members, and the House of Representatives has about 360 members. And typically, to be a member of the Senate, you have to be at least 30 years old, and to be a member of the House of Representatives, you have to be at least 25 years old. Now, of both of them, you obviously don't have to have any sort of criminal record. You have to be a citizen of the country, and you have to have at least a high school certificate. So you would register, belong to a political party, choose the district of the country that you wish to represent for at least a year, and then apply to be a member of the National Assembly, either for the Senate or the House of Representatives. Now, the National Assembly, they've had so much power that they can regulate their rules of operation by themselves. This is how powerful that they are, meaning like the presidential seat or the judiciary cannot even interfere with them, especially when they are trying to do things for themselves in order to give themselves some sort of privileges to. For example, they can give themselves immunity from some sorts of federal offenses. This is how powerful that they are. And the Senate of the House of Representatives, they typically would write these laws that would take the effect in a country and pass it to the president to sign. So it begins to show that the National Assembly has so much power that the president seems to be a puppet for them. Now, the question is, if the National Assembly has this much power, why did they have to make it a Senate and a House of Representatives? Why not just one body? Now, this is because if they gave it to one body, these people will see themselves as the ruling class. In a sense, they are still the ruling class, but dividing the power into two makes it in such a way that the Senate and the House of Representatives can cancel each other out in terms of the power. So one side does not have too much power more than the other side. They can check and balance each other because each of these branches have their own powers and their functions. So they need to work together in order to pass a bill or pass a legislation which will be able to carry out important tasks. Now, also, the Senate is meant to represent the states, and the House of Representatives are meant to represent the citizens of that country. Now, the next branch of power in a government is the executive branch, and this is led by the person who is on the presidential seat. He's typically called the president of a country, also like the CEO of a country, since he is the one in charge of ensuring that all the different departments of that country is actually functioning. And second to him is the vice president, who is like the second high-ranking official. And both the vice president and the president, they need to have the same criteria to be elected officials for that seat. So they have to be a citizen of the country by birth. They have to be at least 40 years old, and they have to be sponsored by a political party. Now, some of the powers that the president would have is such as vetoing a law that the National Assembly has passed across to him. If he feels or decides that this law does not make sense, he can choose to reject it. Although there is a clause in the constitutional law that says that the National Assembly can override his decisions. So it makes me begin to wonder if the president actually has the type of power that he's supposed to have on the seat, being that the National Assembly can even override some of his decisions. Another of the power that he has, being the chief of armed forces, he has control of the military, the air force, and he's the person who gets to decide how to defend a country if there's any sort of external attacks. He also has the ability to choose who his cabinet members are, so basically choosing like heads that he would want to put in the various departments. So it's kind of like his managers for the different sectors in which the government runs. So you're thinking about the INEC officials who he puts in there. The head of the INEC is the president who selects him. The judiciary, the head, like the chief judge of the judiciary system, the president is the one who puts him in there. Same thing for the Ministry of Finance, and etc. and so on. The president also has the ability to actually write out the budget of spending that's going to go on in a country, and once he's done with this, he submits this back to the National Assembly, where they have to read and approve or reject or modify it. He also has the ability to execute specific orders or decisions without the National Assembly, so he can go in there and put in executive orders, but obviously this can also be negated by the judiciary power. And finally, the judiciary branch, or the Supreme Court, compared to the other two, they don't really do much, but they do have the power to interpret the laws that has been written out by the National Assembly, and they can settle out the disputes that they might have between the presidential seat and the National Assembly, because these two constantly get at each other. And this constitution gives the judiciary and the Supreme Court some sort of autonomy of themselves, so that they wouldn't have to be influenced by any of the different branches, and they will remain impartial, although I don't know how efficient they are with being impartial. But generally, the constitution dictates that this is how they should be. So the idea of the checks and balance system is to ensure that no one branch has more power over the other, at least in theory. Practically speaking, the National Assembly has the highest power in the country, followed by the presidential seats. And being that all these are humans, they are all subjected to emotions just like we all are. They're subjected to greed, pride, envy, jealousy, gluttony, etc. And by knowing that they're subject to human nature, they tend to be biased about some of the laws that they put out there, primarily to ensure that they constantly benefit from the current government that is going in there. So by also understanding more about the laws, where they're coming from, we can obviously position ourselves in such a way that those laws begin to benefit us, and also give us the ability to understand how the country is being governed, why the president takes some types of decisions that he does, and how it affects everybody as a whole, in order to ensure that both the presidential seat is benefiting as well as the National Assembly is also benefiting as well. So this brings us to the end of the episode. Hope you enjoyed it and got some value from it. Don't forget to rate us on Spotify and share with a friend that you think might actually also get some value from this. So stay tuned for the next discussion. Until then, take care and bye bye.